Good afternoon, everyone. We'll wait for everybody to chime in here, but want to welcome you to SJSU, San Jose State University's Institute for the Study of Sports, Society, and Social Change. Our webinar that we are having here, Sport Conversations. If you're wanting to follow us, please go to Words to Action, our website, SJSU, wordstoaction.com. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/SJSU Words to Action, or follow us on our Twitter account. And you can find us on Twitter here at SJSU Words to Action. So greetings, everyone. And again, welcome to the Institute for the Study of Sports, Society, and Social Change, our digital platform meeting and program, Sport Conversations for Social Change. Today's conversation is a part of our series on conversations that discuss the state of sport in the time of COVID-19. We will be hosting these conversations again over the next few weeks. We've hosted a few already, so please check our website for our previous programs that we've had. I'm Dr. Akila Carter-Francique, the Executive Director for the Institute for the Study of Sports, Society, and Social Change here at San Jose State University. The Institute was started in 2017 with the goal to honor SJSU legacy and continue the dialogue about athlete activism and the influence of sport in affecting positive social change. Again, as our nation confronts and expresses deeply complex social issues, such as this COVID-19, it's critical that we continue to challenge the boundaries of sport and activism. Sport offers the occasion to pose big questions, not just to athletes, right, but to ourselves, and provide enlightening perspectives. Thus, the mission of the Institute is dedicated to research, analysis, and education at the intersection of sport and society. To learn more, again, please go to those websites, our Facebook site, as well as Twitter. So we look forward to our conversation today. Our topic of conversation, as you'll see here, we'll get to some of those details, but over the next hour, what we really want to get into, as you can see here, is HBCU athletics, academics, and COVID-19. This week's conversation will examine the state of historically Black colleges and universities' athletic programs. Our conversation, more specifically, will focus on the experiences of athletes, coaches, and athletic departments' daily operations, and how HBCUs are continuing to nurture the holistic development, academic engagement, and mental health and well-being of its college athletes during COVID-19. Again, if you have any comments, questions that you want to have, please use the chat box we have over there, and we'll take those at the end of the program. But I really want to find out who's in our audience today. So as I take a moment to introduce our esteemed colleagues that we have here coming from all across the country, we've got a short poll for you so we know who you are, and I'm going to introduce all of you all to these great guests that we have today. So today we have with us Dr. Marcus Amos. He's a native of Augusta, Georgia, and the founder of Prevention Education for Athletes. He currently serves as the assistant professor in sport management department, and he's also the sport management department coordinator. He's a faculty athletic rep for the NAIA conference at Voorhees College. Welcome. We also have with us Dr. Kiki Baker-Barnes. She's the athletic director at Dillard University and is the current president of the NAIA Athletic Directors Association Board of Directors. She also serves as a board member for the Greater New Orleans Sport Foundation and the Minority Opportunities Athletic Association, also known as MOA. She is the first female, let me say that again, the first female and first African-American president of the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, and is currently serving as an interim commissioner. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Joseph Cooper. He is a Dr. J. Keith Motley Endowed Chair of Sport Leadership and Administration and an Associate Professor in the Leadership and Education Department in the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. His research agenda focuses on the intersection between sport, education, race, and culture. Welcome. Next, we have Dr. Kenyatta Cavill. He's a professor of sport management and sports studies at Texas Southern University. He is a prominent voice on business and leadership of historically Black colleges and universities, and a specialist on sporting HBCU diaspora programs. He is a joint author with Dr. Billy Hawkins, Joseph Cooper, who's on our panel, myself, of an edited textbook, The Athletic Experience at Historically Black Colleges and Universities, Past, Present, and Persistence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joining us is his colleague, Dr. Courtney Flowers. She's an associate professor of sport management at Texas Southern University, a specialist on building cultures of inclusion in sports. Her research interests address systemic and culturally based forms of bias and prejudice. She also serves as a faculty affiliate for the Institute for the Study of Sports, Society, and Social Change here at San Jose State University. Welcome. Dr. Michelle Richardson is also joining us. She's an assistant professor of sport management at Coppin State University in the College of Business. Her scholarly endeavors examine college athletic experiences within HBCUs. As an educator of sport, she is committed to serving and promoting social change through sport and beyond. Next, we have Coach Willie Simmons. He's currently the head football coach at Florida A&M University, FAMU, right? He previously served as a head coach at Prairie View A&M University. His other coaching stints include Alcorn State, Middle Tennessee State, and his alma mater of Clemson University, where he received a Bachelor of Science degree in sports marketing in 2002. And last and certainly not least, we have Coach Angela Williams. She's in her 13th season as a head coach of the women's track and field and cross country program at Prairie View A&M University. Williams has been able to develop 20 Southwestern Athletic Conference individual champions, 10 NCAA Outdoor Regional Championship qualifiers, 1 NCAA Outdoor Championship semifinalist, 1 NCAA Indoor Championship qualifier, 8 SWAC indoor and outdoor record holders, and 5 top 10 ranked USA juniors and 1 USA track and field finalist. Woo, that is a mouthful. We have an amazing panel with us today. I'm so delighted. One of my first things I want to do here is, again, we're going to this poll. I want to look at some of the results that we have so we know who is with us today. So let's go ahead and share those results that we have. So as you can see, we've got a number of people joining us today, from athletic director to coaches, and then we have a lot of others. So I'm assuming we have maybe a lot of students on hand. So we'll look forward to having some robust conversation today. One of the first questions I want to speak with all of my panelists about, and I start this program every day or every time with it, but what does sport mean to you? If you could provide us, each panelist here today, tell us real brief, what does sport mean to you? We'll start with Dr. Richardson.
Sport to me is it's that one thing that it doesn't matter where you are, what country you're from, or where you are. It's that thing that can bring us all together. We've seen wars stopped in the middle of a war, and people play a soccer game, and then after that they go back to being at war with one another. So it's that one thing, like music, that just can that unites a world.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Amos.
I immediately I've gotten past the competition outlook of it because that's so obvious. But I look at sport more so as a life changer because we utilize sport in so many different aspects for national tragedies, or just for individuals to use as mental wellness components. And so sports has evolved from more than a win and loss aspect into it has developed individuals as people to understand the meaning of teamwork, and taking teamwork from the competitive aspect and using it in everyday life in reference to employment and even as teaching other individuals within the realm of sports.
Great, thank you. Dr. Baker Barnes, what does sport mean to you?
Sport to me is the place where we can learn how to develop teamwork. It's what I like to call our a classroom. It's the space where we have a great opportunity to try out different concepts in order to see whether they work, and then being able to take those concepts and transfer them into other spaces. I often tell people that everything I learned about leadership, I learned on the basketball court. So in my personal opinion, for me, sport is definitely a space where we can learn and grow our leadership skills.
Great, thank you. Dr. Cavill.
Yes, sport is an activity that tends to bring a group of people together.
You with us? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to keep it simple in terms of that. I just believe that generally sports is an activity that tends to bring a group of people together. It can be culturally involved. It can be different age range, if you would, in terms of that component. But simply put, it's usually an activity that tends to bring people together across different classifications, whether it's in terms of a team, or if it's individuals competing with each other, or if it's some type of fan perspective and interaction of following individuals or a group of teams together.
Thank you. I was used to Dr. Cavill giving a more robust answer. I've heard him present several times, and so he took me off guard there.
Sorry about that. I'm gonna save that for a little later. I was trying to be brevity and make sure we share the space with our guests here.
So funny. Okay. Dr. Flowers, if you could share with us, what does sport mean to you?
Sport is a common denominator. It allows us a space to really find some of those similarities across races, across genders. But most importantly to me, sport is that place that allows me to be able to discuss with people who have varying views, things that are different, or things that maybe we find controversial, like discrimination, racial injustice. We can use sport as a way to kind of guide us, to help us to have those heavy, if you will, conversations.
Thank you. Coach Simmons.
One thing I'm going to ask Doc, if you're going to ask philosophical questions, like ask the non-PhD people first. So because everyone stole all of our answers. But to me, I mean, sport is life, you know, and when I look, there are three things in my life that I feel like give me context in any situation. That's my faith, that's my education, and that's my sports career. And so there's not a situation that I can go through in life that I can't use one of those three things to get me out of it. And so I think sports is just another microcosm of life. You know, and I use sport as my way to infuse life lessons to the young men that I'm privileged to you know, lead and represent. So in one word, to me, sport is life.
Okay, great. And Coach Williams, I think we need to unmute yourself real quick and we can hear. There we go.
Okay, Willie, you didn't have to take what I was gonna say. And it's good to see you. For me, sports is life. I think it transcends beyond the field. And I can't do anything without looking at my sports career and how it has thrusted me to where I am academically. So it's everything. It teaches discipline, relationships, friendships. It teaches you how to manage the highs and lows of life. In sports, you have so many disappointments and you find your way to make it through those disappointments. And I think it just makes you a much stronger individual overall.
Right. And Dr. Cooper, did I get your voice?
Oh, yes. Once again, being the last one, I believe everybody has communicated what sport is to me as well. But I'll just add that sport is a place of identity, expression, connectedness, and empowerment. And it just sums up what everybody said. For each of us individually, it's been a place where a part of our identities have been able to develop. For our people historically and today, it's a place of expression. As Dr. Cavill mentioned, culturally, it's a space where we're able to express who we are, our values, our beliefs in that space, sense of connectedness within our culture and across cultures, and then a source of empowerment. You know, historically in places where we were banned or we were excluded or denied opportunities, sport has been a place where we've been able to come together and be empowered. And definitely HBCUs have been the cornerstone of that empowerment within the United States for African Americans.
Great. So one of the things that I wanted to get into is really, you know, help everybody understand what are HBCUs. What is HBCU? You hear an acronym all the time, and understand it's a historically Black college and university. I'm gonna have Dr. Cooper kind of give us some backstory on what those HBCUs are, its history. But before we do that, I wanted to show a brief trailer from a film that came out a couple years ago, called Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of Black colleges and universities. And so we're gonna watch that just briefly, and then we'll get into the rest of our conversation. Let me get out of that.
The question for African Americans has always been, what is education's purpose? Who controls it? And what is the relationship of education to the broader aspirations of our people?
The more the system denies you the chance to read and to write, the more that becomes a prize that you must have.
Black colleges were redefining what it meant to be Black in America. You were pursuing a career where intellect mattered.
An educated Black population could not be an enslaved Black population.
If you weren't out there demonstrating, then something had to be wrong with your school.
We wanted freedom now, but whites were not prepared for any changes here.
I think they should be kept out any way possible.
A slaveholder could work a slave to death. He could rape a slave. He could do virtually anything but teach a slave how to read or write.
As soon as the war breaks out, the first thing they want is to get an education.
They wanted those schools to be as free as possible from paternalism, from racism, whether subtle or blatant.
Movements are easily birthed on HBCU's campuses.
We must love and protect each other.
We're all going through the same experience.
HBCU is somewhere where I can be completely myself.
The Black college experience provides the place to be in the majority. That is such a unique and empowering experience.
This HBCU experience has taught me that anything is possible as long as you have that one spark.
So great. I mean, hopefully that video brought a little context to what HBCUs are. Dr. Cooper, could you share from your perspective and your research and scholarly experience, your understanding of HBCUs and share that with our audience today?
Yes, I'm happy to. First thing I want to highlight to the audience is that the creation of historically Black colleges and universities was a revolutionary act. As you heard in the video, when the first HBCUs were founded, Cheyney University in 1837, Lincoln University in 1854, and Wilberforce in 1856, this was prior to the Emancipation Proclamation. This is prior to the 13th Amendment. So you're talking about a context where Blacks were still legally enslaved. There were state and federal laws that involved banning Blacks the right to read. So what whites who were seeking to enslave Blacks knew was education and knowledge was the tool to unlock the oppression that they were experiencing. So historically Black colleges and universities were created to provide educational pathways for African Americans. It initially focused on focused on teaching, but it began to expand in 1890 with the Federal Moral Land Grant Act, where significant numbers of HBCUs were funded through federal funding. And they were created in academic disciplines in agriculture, in science, in medicine, in mathematics, in law, in a myriad of fields. So, and when we think about the early 20th century through all the way up into the modern day, many of our thought leaders, many of our agents of change have graduated and emerged from HBCUs. And even today, HBCUs are disproportionately responsible for Black students who enroll in graduate schools, Black students who pursue STEM careers, and Black students who pursue political careers. So we know that from the origins, it was designed to have a race-conscious, race-specific, culturally relevant pedagogical approach. And another point that I really want to highlight is a majority of our HBCUs were founded in former Confederate or former states where slavery was prominent. And they're located in predominantly Black communities. So the institutions are embedded within a broader communal effort to uplift our humanity and uplift our well-being. So I wanted to make sure to highlight that, and HBCUs, including programs at our institutions, have historically and continue to be sources of empowerment and purveyors of knowledge and uplift for African Americans, as well as for students across diverse backgrounds.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us that that insight. So we definitely have a firm grasp on, these institutions and what they've prepared. They've also been a big component of not only putting out these doctors, engineers, lawyers, what have you. Let me get my screen over here to share. But they've also been ones that put to definitely prepare our athletes for the future. So we've got some phenomenal images here of these icons. And with that said, Dr. Cavill, could you give us some insight on HBCUs and its contribution to the world of sport, to college athletics?
Certainly. Again, thank you, Dr. Keela Carter-Francique and the San Jose State University, as well as the Institute for the Study of Sports Society and Social Change. With that said, I wish everyone all well during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. First, it is in understanding the role of sports teams in college athletics at historically Black colleges and universities. It's important to note HBCUs and of themselves are extremely diverse. And whether you're reviewing them from the US Census regions, Carnegie classifications, enrollment size, private or public, National Athletic Association, the athletic divisional alignment, as well as conference affiliation. With that said, the HBCU social, historical, and social cultural is unique, and what I refer to as the sporting HBCU diaspora, as part of the HBCU sports culture and athletics aesthetics. This means that the cultural identity of HBCU mores in the African American community, i.e. the sport HBCU diaspora, is a framework associated with 6 multi-level paradigms: racial pride, for example, culture expression, Black masculinity, Black femininity, social engagement, economic development, which was put together to create a community and cultural empowerment frame. Simply, the early athletic history and culture of the sporting HBCU diaspora was a monumental force in the formation of Black institutional life, and is still that to this very day. As we review this sporting HBCU diaspora throughout this conversation, it's important for us to understand the current context. It's important even more so to frame HBCUs as Black institutions situated as cultural sources of empowerment during these different waves of society that we see in over different periods of time historically.
Thank you so much. Understanding this background, I'm happy to say we've got some HBCU former athletes on our panel. One of them being our very own here, Dr. Flowers, who's a part of our institute, as well again as Dr. Cooper is a part of our institute. So I forgot to mention that, but I wanted to make sure to let everybody know. But Dr. Flowers, you were a college golfer at Mississippi Valley State. What did it mean to you to play at a HBCU?
It was a totally different experience. For the first time ever, I was not the Black girl on the golf team. More importantly, it was some of the questions changed. Questions like, what brought you to golf versus can you play? I had never been asked if I could play. There was always an assumption that I could not, because again, I'm an African-American female. I played on an all-white high school team. And so coming from that environment where you are the only African-American on a team for 4 years, and then going into the environment for 4 years being just the AKA with curly hair was a huge transition to me, but it was a welcoming system of family. It was the first time I felt like I was on a family team. I had competed in elementary school, had never really had that family because I was so isolated. People were more interested in, you know, how did you get in this space? For the first time, I was asked, you know, how do you feel being on this golf course? And then it's so unique at Mississippi Valley State. A little bit of background. It had been in Mississippi, obviously home of Jerry Rice, but also ironically right next door to a beautiful golf course that Mississippi Valley State was not allowed to use. Our home course was in Greenville, which was 30 miles up the road. And so being right next door to a golf course that was restricted, that the doors were closed to, that unfortunately me with lighter skin was allowed to go on the golf course, but some of my teammates that had darker complexion was not allowed that same privilege of using the golf course that was right next door. Again, being able to pick up the phone, having a maiden name of Snell helped as well. Courtney Snell does not sound African-American. Again, so some of those walls, you know, for that some of my teammates faced was not some of the walls that I faced. But being at a HBCU provided those complexities. Being in Delta, Mississippi also provided some complexities. Going to the golf course and having to face racism and discrimination. If you know anything about history and looking back at the Delta itself, understanding being Black golfers in a system where there's still segregation. I love sharing the story with my students. My first week at Mississippi Valley State, the Klan marched. Here I am in my 40s and I actually got a chance to see the Klan march. You know, it provided a unique system, but being on that campus and having those shared values, being taught that golf was a tool towards education, having a coach that told me day one, you're expected to get a master's degree, blew my mind. And so I learned very quickly what was expected of me as a golfer was important. Yes, get out there and play games, but it's more important that you cross that stage. I need you across that stage, and then I need you to get a master's even more. Great experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. Great experience.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, sharing the notion of access, sharing colorism, sharing being that face-to-face overt racism. It's a lot to take as a student at that age. Again, young, formidable age years. Coach Williams, you have had a phenomenal experience, life experience. I had the opportunity to watch you last week educate track and field coaches. And in that presentation that you gave, I learned something about you that I did not know as a former, because I worked at Prairie View A&M along with you. But I learned that you spent a couple years as an athlete at Tennessee State. Is that correct? Under the famed Ed Temple, who coached the golf and the Tennessee Tiger Bells.
Yes.
Tell us what it was like with that experience. And also, what does it mean to you now to coach at a HBCU?
It's kind of weird for me because when I went on my visit to Tennessee State, HBCU wasn't any acronyms that I heard. There was no separation between PWI and HBCU. Tennessee State was the premier school for Black women athletes. And I was Coach Temple's last Olympian, the last person that he coached that made it on an Olympic team in 1984. And one of the reasons why my mom actually helped me choose Tennessee State was I grew up in a very strong and stern family background. You know, you have to be responsible, you're accountable and everything else. And Coach Temple kind of he emulated that. He was the person that she said, I feel comfortable with you there. And every school in the country wanted me at the time. And so I chose Tennessee State because of the rich history that they had. Plus I wanted to be a physical therapist, and they had a school of physical therapy there. And my visit captured me because I grew up in New York. I never saw Majorettes, the band. I never saw any sorors. I ended up pledging at Tennessee State, and it was a wonderful experience. And I ended up transferring from Tennessee State because one of the things that, and I didn't understand at the time, Temple did not subscribe to NCAA. So I came out of high school, #1 female sprinter in the nation, and he did not allow me to go to the NCAA indoor or outdoor championship my freshman and sophomore year.
Wow.
And that was difficult for me because as the NCAAs is the Olympics of track and field, collegiate track and field.
Right.
So, you know, being allowed to go to the '84 Olympics, that's great, but I also want to compete at the NCAA indoor and outdoor championship. So I missed out on being an All-American my first 2 years of college. Okay. And so I made the decision, that and amongst other things, I made the decision to leave. And once the coach at Seton Hall, he was the first to find out I was leaving, and he was like, here's your scholarship on the table. And it was back it's in Jersey, so it was close to New York, so I ended up going. But the experience at Tennessee State, I think, has kept me at Prairie View as an educator and a coach. And I couldn't see myself, for as long as I've been at this institution, I couldn't see myself anywhere else trying to educate and coach our young women.
All right. Thank you so much. It's just a phenomenal story and history, and we could probably sit and I want to just sit at your feet and learn some more about that experience. It's got to be a great one. And glad, I think those young women are glad, you know, to have you there and just have that rich experience and background. I mean, Olympian, who gets better than that? So, and I understand, again, the opportunity to be at a HBCU. I did not attend one. I went to University of Houston, but was right next door to Texas Southern University. So I got to absorb all of the HBCU likings with that. My parents are HBCU grads from Lincoln University in Missouri. But my children were very young, and so they grew up on PV's campus. And so right now my son, to be honest, is missing Prairie View Band. So we are trying to work through that right now. We'll be at somebody's homecoming, I'm sure. Thank you so much for that. One of the things that I thought was so important about HBCUs that I also wanted to bring to the conversation is, yes, we are talking about you know, what our HBCUs experience in this age of COVID-19. I had the great opportunity to listen to the other day, the HBCU President's Roundtable, the state of connectivity in the age of COVID-19 pandemic. And this was an opportunity for HBCU presidents to talk about what they are doing, what changes they are having, what experiences that their students are going through, what their faculty are challenged with meeting. It was moderated by Dr. David Johns, who's with the National Black Justice Coalition. There was an opening comment by the Office of the FCC, the Commissioner Jeffrey Starks. And one of the things that sort of they highlighted in this was the disconnect, to Dr. Cooper's point about the racial divide, to Dr. Cavill's point about even the economic divide. It was just the notion that this is something that needs to be discussed. So if you haven't heard it, I highly suggest to go to this talk. It's about an hour long. But again, the HBCU President's Roundtable, State of Connectivity in the Age of COVID-19 Pandemic. From that, I wanted to come to you all and more specifically to, again, how does this affect this world of sport? And so Coach Simmons, the mission of Florida A&M University is excellence through caring. In what way has FAMU and FAMU Athletics supported student athletes through this COVID-19 time period?
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Francis, for having me on. And it's definitely an honor to be on with such an esteemed panel. And, you know, again, FAMU's motto is excellence with caring, like you said, and I commend our president, Dr. Larry Robinson, as well as his administration for really getting ahead of this thing. And we were one of the first states to administer the online instruction. And so once we made that decision, it was about trying to figure out how to best serve our students. And so we've done a number of things. I get an email alert every day from iStrike, which is our student email alert system, FAMU information, which comes through 2 to 3 times a day. And so we've had a number of things. We've provided multiple academic resources for our students. We've administered laptops to those who are going to areas where maybe they don't have access to computer or internet access at their homes through various grants to care. Act grant has been a godsend for us to be able to get some of those resources to some of our students. Obviously, we have individuals who don't come from the best home situations. And so being able to provide resources to those individuals through the different grants and funds that we have available to get those students, you know, fed, they give them access to just a quality of life. You know, many of our students come to college to get away from their home situation. You know, I think one of the major things about HBCUs, and FAMU is no different than Prairie View A&M in that sense, that we're able to transform a kid's socioeconomic situation over that 4-year period. They come from nothing and they leave with the ability to have a quality of life. And that's something that many of these students have had to be thrown back into because of COVID-19. And so again, we've done those type of things. We have weekly mental health calls with our students and trying to really check on their mental state during this time. That's one of the toughest things for us as coaches, is that we're not able to put our hands, figuratively speaking, on our students and not be able to see them every day and have them come into our offices and close the door and have those heart-to-heart conversations that are so critical to the emotional and mental well-being of our students. And so from that perspective, again, we've done a lot of great things. And then from a career standpoint, you know, again, we've had career development, we've had professional development from corporations such as Dow, Goldman and Sachs, Wells Fargo did a seminar with our student athletes about financial responsibility. And so again, just trying to continue our goal and our mission to empower our students, not just our student athletes, but our students in general here at Florida A&M has been something that, again, I commend our president for, and our athletics director, Courtney who's really spearheaded his initiative to really empower our young men and women with the tools necessary to have a successful life when they leave the Heights of Seven Hills.
Thank you so much. Yes, your president was on this program, so I hear those points echoed, and it's good to know that, you know, how you're supporting them through this process. And I think you made a good point too about being, you know, trying to leave communities to pursue an education and get out of some of those circumstances, but now we're kind of put back in. I'm sort of in that space right now where we've got mom, dad, we've got generations living in the household, all trying to use internet at the same time, Zoom meetings, and it can be very challenging. So it's good, and I commend you all for, you know, checking in with those athletes, those young people, trying to figure this out, because this is new for everybody, definitely new for everybody. With that said, Dr. Baker-Barnes, Dillard University mission is to produce graduates who excel, become world leaders, are broadly educated, culturally aware, and concerned with improving the human condition. Share with us your role and the importance of your leadership and communications between the athletic departments and the greater university, as well as that surrounding Louisiana community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis, for the opportunity, and just glad to be here with all my colleagues. So one of the things that's very interesting that we mentioned earlier was the impact that sports has and its ability to bring people together. In my role as athletic director, first, in terms of taking care of our student athletes, it's really important that we ensure that our student athletes are getting all of the services that they need, just like other students. Whereas the Dillard University is a private HBCUs. So we're a little bit smaller than some of our larger land grants like Prairie View, Florida A&M, as we've discussed. So in terms of how we provide support for our students, it's really important that athletics is fully integrated into the entire university, and that we don't have kind of student athletes separated from what else is going on. So ensuring integration is really, really important in terms of my leadership for the department. On the flip side, externally, the athletic director, athletics department, I am an ambassador. I am a part of representing Dillard University, globally. I think one of the wonderful things about our athletic programs at HBCUs is the fact that we are brand ambassadors, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to extend our university's brand using our sports. Right now, we have our largest event every year is usually our Blue Devil Classic, and finding ways to create communities, especially now when we're having this situation where we can't be together, showing older sports videos, doing Throwback Thursday in terms of our social media content and spaces. Things like that are ways that we as the athletics program is helping to expand the university's brand in a time where we can't be together. There's the nostalgia that people have from experiences that they've had by attending athletic events. And so on the flip side of it, that's a space where, number one, we work collaboratively with our development team, again, or in our alumni relations office. When you bring up that one game or that probate or, that event, that is the core signature event. And, again, most likely, usually for HBCUs, it's classics. So you bring up that one classic, you can keep community going as we're navigating this space. So I see, my role in terms of how we're dealing with the pandemic, both in trying to continue to keep the connection to community, as well as providing the support that our student athletes need as we move forward.
Thank you so much. That voice and that connectivity, I think, again, that's that foundation of that HBCU. And so I've heard always good work and great work from you. So I thank you for sharing that. And we look forward to some other best practices as we sort of round out the end of the session. I wanted to switch directions real quick and still continue on, again, discussing issues as it relates to HBCUs and connecting, but May is National Mental Health Month. And so with all that's going on, it's a bit ironic that we're having sort of these discussions now, but it's also, this notion of mental health is our running theme for our institute that we have going on this year. And so with every program, we've talked about sort of the state of mental health of athletes. And so with that said, I want our in-house doc to give us some insight. Again, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And one of the things is, could you talk to us a little bit about how you are communicating with student athletes? Again, learning of the issues regarding the president's conversation, the in-home situations that student athletes may be facing, the financial situations, the connectivity, not being able to communicate as Coach suggested. Can you speak to the mental health impact of COVID-19 in general, and then on athletes at the HBCU specifically?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say, everybody, please, let's continue to practice social distancing and just be safe as we deal with this pandemic. And thank you for having me on today. We use the term mental health, and I think that one key thing that we have to focus on is the mental wellness first, because when we focus on mental wellness, that sometimes is a preventive action before we have to deal with the mental diagnosis, and I think that that's very key. And with this dealing with this pandemic, we have to understand that we've had several athletes that their wellness structure is coming to the institution and getting out of the environment that they were in. And now they're returning to those environments. And what does that look like? It was individualized with every student athlete. The care of the student athletes are individualized with whatever structure was already predicated on campus, and the students don't have that type of support structure anymore. And so there you see the picture up there, and you have individuals sitting at a table. Support for the athlete. Really, at an HBCU, you would see each individual at that table would probably wear 4 or 5 hats. So the appropriate picture for an HBCU outlook is 1 body, 4 heads. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And so we have to continue to have those conversations to support the athlete because of the environments they're going back to. I'm gonna tell you a very, very quick story. I'm mentoring an athlete right now, and I called and checked on him to see how he was doing. And the first thing he said was, "I'm back in the same rut," is the term that he used, that I was in before. And it was a matter of just not being able to concentrate and complete his assignments online because of the environment that he returned to. Different socioeconomics with this individual. So he's not able to revert to a different side of a wing of his house. Everything is congested. And so this individual literally had to pack up and move to Atlanta, Georgia, to a relative's house just to have a sense of normalcy in his life in order to complete his assignment. So what does that have to do with mental health and mental wellness? Well, there's the frustration and anxiety of needing to complete his assignment because this individual is not only a standout student athlete, but this individual is very focused on his academics. He's far removed from the possibility of going in the draft because he went to this institution with hopes of getting a degree. Okay, so that's just a kind of an idea of what some of our student athletes deal with. And so we look at the makeup of what is impacted when our student athletes are having these personal issues. Just not the student athlete, they're individuals within the family. It affects their development, affects their engagement, it affects their focus. And Coach Simmons, I'm quite sure you can jump in, and if you want to reiterate with this at any time, is that when we have the student athlete in a structured environment on campus, we're able to recognize and see other problems in their areas that will, other personal problems in their areas, in their personal development areas that can be affected, and we're able to catch that problem or able to address that problem before it raises to a mode of level 10. Okay, and a lot of times there's simple things that are going on in the athlete's life that will affect their stability emotionally and mentally. And they're focused on what can I do now that I'm back in that same environment. But sometimes there's not an escape mode. Okay, so we look at all the players, all the stakeholders that are involved, and who can be affected when issues of mental health instability are present. One thing I'll tell you is that I encourage my athletes to put 100% in their craft, which is their athletic skill. And individuals say, well, it has to be a balance with their education also. Well, their athletic craft is the reason why they're going to school for free for a lot of athletes. And so with the pressure of trying to sustain their physical ability, their athletic ability, it can get to a point to where an athlete has to deal with, well, what's going to happen if I'm not able to continue on my craft? Right now, I've had several conversations with student athletes at home that are wondering, am I going to be awarded another year? Am I going to be able to come back to school and maintain my scholarship because this is the only way that I'm going to be able to go to college? Those are mental wellness issues that we need to deal with. Anxiety and depression are two of the top issues that I've heard student athletes express that they encounter when addressing and dealing with this transition back home. Within our institutions, we are not able, from an HBCU standpoint, to have the financial means at times to be able to have those structured, needed facilities and staff to be able to house mental health clinicians on campus. A lot of times we cannot even afford to outsource. We deal with the old tradition of the HBCU and student athletes have the nourishment to be able to get by and deal with it. And a lot of times that's just not enough. Just because a lot of our professors and faculty members look like them, that doesn't mean that that's the nourishment that they need to deal with a lot of mental wellness issues and problems. Injuries play a key role also with the mental health and mental wellness issues in athletes. Because when injuries are prevalent, a lot of times that's when medication has to be involved. A lot of our athletes cannot deal with not being able to play, perform in their sport, and that's when issues of anxiety, depression come in, and that's when a lot of medication is needed to deal with that. Most of the athletes that I have dealt with who are currently open in discussing what they're dealing with in relation to COVID-19, the problem is as simple as having too many people in my home that I cannot concentrate. And I have no escape mode. Now, with coaches, and I've talked to a lot of coaches across the country, and they've done great jobs of continuing to try to reach out to the athlete and having sessions every week through Zoom, just to have them maintain a sense of a normal atmosphere in relation to being around athletics and just seeing their teammates. We took a small pool with about 3 institutions from Division I, Division II, and Division III levels. And we talked about what is the biggest impact that your athletes have complained about with the COVID-19. And most of the coaches have said that it's just not being able to be around my teammates and my coaches. And I'm quite sure there are others that are on this webinar that can contest to that.
And
And
Coach,
so,
I was just gonna say here, for the kind of sake of time, summon up a little bit to kind of go to some of these strategies here as we move through. I want to be mindful of everybody's time as we go through, but you mentioned in your work, again, COVID-19, mental health, daily strategies. Here's some information that the NCAA put together with regards to some ways to get through their day-to-day, in addition to understanding that a lot of this information is supported by NAMI, our alliance, National Alliance of Mental Illness that we have. So I know that you provided that. And then the other part that I wanted to make sure that you got to before we start closing out is, this notion of sleep. So the point you talked about, if there's several people in my home, what does that look like? And how will that help them deal? Could you sum up this slide for us real quick about what that means and the importance of sleep in addition to adopting some of those healthy daily strategies that NAMI has talked about?
yes, okay. And real quickly, Dr. Francie, I'm glad that you brought that up. It is very important that we continue our normal pattern. The sleeping regimen it's part of the daily structure when the student athlete is on campus. And so what the NCAA did, and when they put together this pamphlet, and this is actually a 4-module pamphlet, this is just part of it, is are student athletes getting enough sleep? And we're talking about as dealing with the transition. And what coaches have done is coaches have actually put together the same structured regimen that they had on campus, is they follow up with that same regimen and reaching out to the student athletes and making contact with them and trying to keep them on a structured, individualized plan, which will address these areas of health, getting enough sleep, which also transition to mapping out your time that you're actually online trying to complete your coursework. because one problem is that because they're sitting in front of the computer, they don't put together a module of structure. It's because the assignment is up, because I have access to 2 days to complete the assignment, I'll stay on the computer all night long and try to complete the assignment. But no, the coaches have done a very good job on the ones I've reached out to and talked about the student athletes maintaining the same type of structure that you had on campus and trying to maintain that same structure off campus, if that makes sense.
Okay, great, great. So with all of that said, the mental health component we're hearing from everybody is definitely key to the daily life. Again, we're moving from one space, a place that was a safe haven, now it's available. So Dr. Richardson, in your role, you also serve on a number of committees within the upper level administration. And not only that in your institution, but also nationally working with the NAS organization. So what is your take on these inequities as a faculty member, as a program coordinator of sport management, and as the academic, with regard to academic engagement, practical experiences, internships of students? What does all of this mean when we're talking about mental health, access to technology, et cetera?
It's actually, I really enjoyed what Marcus had to say. Coppin State University is a very unique institution. We're right in the heart of Baltimore, in the city, Baltimore City. And the majority of my students they work. They have actual jobs. We're very much a commuter campus. So these inequities, as I said, these inequities are kind of around. Now that the campus has been closed, I have students who don't have computers at home. And so they can't use the computer labs to do their assignments. As was said in the president's meeting the other day, they have cell phones, but have you ever tried to type a paper on a cell phone? You know, it's like you have all of that, but they need, you know, and you can't go to Starbucks and post up and do your paper. You know, all these things are taken away from them. So a lot of my students are stressed out. Plus, some of them, like we had an issue with our international students. We had a lot of international students as student athletes, and they had, you know, we had closed the campus, but we couldn't just kick them out into the world. We had to wait a little bit, you know, and they had to stay in the dorms until we could figure out a way to get them back to their home countries. So that's a whole nother issue within itself. I see Dr. Baker Barnes, you know, I know she probably had to go through the same thing. So there's just all these things, and the smaller your college is, it becomes even more prevalent. Coppin State, as I said, we're a small college within the University of Maryland system, but we still are a small community serving college. And so these kids leave our campus. Sometimes our campus is their refuge. They leave our campus and they go into Baltimore City. And Baltimore City is not, you know, it's a scary place to be depending on where you live. It can be very scary. So it's like we've now taken away this home. We've taken away this place where they could come, they could read, they could learn, they could socialize, and without any type of fear of, or just having a place to talk to. And that actually, and with the campuses being closed as well, you've taken away sometimes their ears. I know we all as coaches and instructors, you have a kid who just comes and sits in your office and it's not about school, it's about life. You know, I had one young man last year who came in and talked to me. He was, you know, he was working, he was a full-time student, and he was a caregiver not only to his mother, but to his sister. What do you do when your caregiver has, you know, now he had nowhere to go when the campus closed. He had nowhere to go to take a breather. So these inequities, I said, I think as the smaller the campus, the larger the inequities are. We're still working on making sure our students have broadband. You know, we're trying to figure out the way to do that. The computer issue is still, once again, an issue, and we're talking about that. But this thing hit everybody by surprise. It hit I don't care what school you were at. If you were at a Michigan or Ohio State or a Coppin or a Dillard, no one was prepared for this. And so I think now going on in the future, things will be different no matter where you go to school.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight and feedback. At this point, I want to take the time to go into some Q&A. If any questions in our audience, please feel free to chime in. We definitely want to hear from you. And so while you're formulating questions, please use that chat box below to insert your questions such that our panelists can be able to hear from you and address some of the questions that you may have. So I do have a couple. One that I wanted to ask before the audience sort of chimes in. Dr. Cooper, real quick, as a race and sports scholar, what is your take on the president's conversation broadly? But again, as we sort of speak to how COVID-19 is sort of reaffirming racial and socioeconomic disparities within our athletic departments, could you give us some quick insight from that?
Sure. It's a common cliche that says when America gets a cold, Black America gets pneumonia. And what we see is that whether it's in sport, in healthcare, in employment, in crime, whenever there is a societal decline, whether it's an economic depression or a pandemic, and what we're dealing with, it exacerbates the inequalities that have been in existence since the founding of this country. And we as African Americans and as Black people in the United States, we have been fighting for humanity, fighting for equality, fighting for advancement in an ecosystem, if you will, that has been imposed on us from a level of dehumanizing us during chattel slavery. And even fast forward to today, when you talk about the inequities in education, as Coach mentioned, and as Dr. Amos mentioned, for many of our young African Americans, sports and athletics is more than just about the enjoyment of the game. For many cases, it is a pathway to higher education through scholarships. And when you're in a situation like we're in right now with COVID-19, particularly when you have several states that have different approaches to how they're responding to it. And I heard one of the presidents yesterday from one of the HBCUs say, our concern, I believe he was the president of Clark Atlanta University, is saying other states are looking at us and seeing how we're responding at the governor level to open up our states. And these are potential students, potential student athletes who would come to our school who are now not going to come.
Right.
For legitimate public health issues. So I think for us as a race scholar and a race and sports scholar, but also just as an African American in this country, the central question of race is always important for us. And we have to think collectively, work together in partnership. I think as much as this is a big challenge for us, it's also a tremendous opportunity for us to recalibrate and think about innovative ways in which we can create sustainable change so that the inequalities that exist now no longer exist moving forward.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We have a question from our audience. We've got a lot of esteemed colleagues in there. Dr. Jackson, Dr. Newton Jackson, we all know him. Great to see you. Carruthers out there, Ruffin Bell. Got a question actually from Ruffin with regards to what are the potential liabilities of HBCU sports returning in the fall with the potential for COVID-19 flare-up. So Dr. Barnes, if you could give us some insight. I know you got another meeting to head to, but I really want your insight as an athletic director. What are some of those potential liabilities that you have seen or perhaps had some discussion about?
Hey, Ruffin, glad to hear from you. Let me just say that first. Oh boy, I tell you what, I think I was on a different webinar and we were having a conversation about all the what ifs of bringing back sports. And I said, who wants to take the responsibility of a student dying? Like what school wants to carry on that liability? And I was more sober in my thought at the time and just kind of saying that it really almost feels like it might be irresponsible for us to even be looking to make that kind of move. Since that may have been about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we've been conversing with our medical team, and our university medical director is on the governor's committee or something, and he does a lot of the research. And so the conversation at this point right now is about protocols and whether we'll have the testing and things in place should we decide to move forward with being able to have sports. For HBCUs and more of the larger HBCUs, not necessarily a Dillard or Xavier, I think that the classics, and when you think about this, that's where we make a lot of our income. And so the potential loss of income for schools, as Dr. Cooper just said, with the pneumonia, you know, losing that money is almost like losing the entire department. So I think, again, if the protocols are in place and we have the necessary support and it's possible for us to do it, I believe that universities will move forward with trying to open. I can tell you where we are right now. Dillard University is looking at a soft opening, meaning that we're going to try to bring students back, some essential personnel, trying to figure out how the res life piece is going to work. And then try to do things in kind of phases. It's kind of the conversation we're having right now. We'll continue, of course, to be looking at the data and what's happening. If you all weren't aware, we're in New Orleans, Louisiana, for the last 6 weeks. Our last day is supposed to be May 15th. Nope, you know, I mean, again, we're looking at data and we'll see. But there's a lot to weigh, Ruffin. There's a lot to weigh. I think at the end of the day, we're going to make the best decision for our community at the end of the day, and hope it doesn't mean we won't have sports. I know that everybody's like, can we please have sports? We can have sports, then maybe we can feel like we're kind of getting back to something that's a little bit more of what we're used to. So that's kind of my take on it. We'll just have to see.
Great. So thank you for that really thoughtful way to sort of think about it, especially from the chair of an athletic director. A couple last questions that I want to ask, and one I just want to popcorn and have you kind of give some insight real quick is, so what are some best practices? As a faculty member, as a coach, some of us are parents, you know, to children that are at HBCUs. What are some quick best practices that some of our other HBCUs or other colleagues, MSIs or those across other universities can adopt that you have integrated? What are some of those best practices that you think are going to work well right now, or that you've already utilized? And I'm going to go to Coach Simmons for that, because you're known for your on the field efforts, but also a lot of your off the field efforts and sort of laying that groundwork from them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And obviously, you know, the toughest part about this is that, you know, who do we turn to? You know, as a head coach, the first thing that I do if I have a problem is I call a head coach that I trust and that, you know, he's been through some things. And so how do I deal with this? Whether it's financial, whether it's injury, or whatever the situation that I've been thrust into, is how do I deal with it? Well, now you have Power 5 institutions called the HBCU saying, what are you guys doing? I mean, because this is new to all of us. And so, you know, what we try to do, obviously, and one of the biggest things that I'm just a stickler for is the mental health aspect of our students. And so everything with us, as far as best practices, gears around making sure that from a health and wellness standpoint, that our students are in a good place. And so, I mean, it's as simple as daily phone calls. I mean, I'm on my coaches every day about constantly checking in with our students. And the biggest thing that I've found in my years of coaching is that most of the young men that I coach are African-American. And we were raised, and I'm a product of that as well, we were raised in a culture of don't tell. You know, don't talk about what you're going through. Don't show weakness. Don't show any sign that you're not the big, strong guy that everyone expects you to be on Saturday afternoons. And so the problem that we found is that a lot of our guys will not tell us what they're going through. They simply will not divulge that information to us, that they're having financial issues, that they're having internet issues, that they're having, you know, mental breakdowns, that they just find themselves losing it. And so we're just encouraging those guys more and more to just open up. We have resources in place. You know, Florida A&M, just like many of the institutions on this call, have resources in place, but I gotta tell them all the time, I'm a lot of things. A psychic is not one of them. So you have to divulge that information to me so that I can point you in the right direction and tap into the resources that we have. So that's just been something I've been really adamant about, is really encouraging our young men to just open up, open up, and how can we, you know, help serve them in that manner.
Thank you for that. Really trying to normalize this notion of mental health, I think, is the thing, is that we all have, you know, mental health challenges, and they may, you know, happen one day and the next day things are fine. But I appreciate you talking about that, and then using that strategy of making those phone calls. Do we have a couple other that want to sort of share? Coach Williams, perhaps?
Yes, so for me at Prairie View, they've done a great job with our student athletes. None of our student athletes were forced to leave. So I actually still have student athletes that are on campus. Their move out date is the 8th. My student athletes' mental health has been pretty good because the ones who wanted to go home went home. And the ones who wanted to stay on campus have been able to stay on campus. My concern now is once they do go home, the ones who did not want to, that's where I may struggle with their mental health issue. We have been able to have our student athletes in summer school for the past few years. If they wanted to attend, whether they were in trouble academically or not, that was something that was afforded to them. That's not going to happen this summer. Plus, our summer school is now online. And so I think it's the what's going to happen next for us, because everything has been pretty good and we've been following NCAA guidelines, following COVID, the doctor's guidelines and everything else. But now that we're transitioning to summer, how do we manage those student athletes that now have to be off campus and maybe in situations that we really don't want them in? So I think that's a discussion that's taking place. And we just had our call before this call about how we are going to transition back to campus. And we'll be doing a soft transition in 3 phases, like probably most people, starting with head coaches and necessary staff on the 18th of May, then another 50% on June 1st, and then hopefully 100% by June 15th, transitioning to campus. So that's where we are now, and now we're trying to figure out how our budget's gonna look without athletic fees going on, since there's, nothing taking place in athletics. So, I can't charge you a fee if, you're not there. So what's our budget going to look like? So we as coaches have been charged to look at our budget, see where we could scale back on the spending that may have been taking place for a period of time and manage those budgets. May come from salaries or travel, anything else. So we're kind of on the same page with everyone else.
Dr. Flowers, I want to sort of end with you with this question before we go into our final takeaways for the webinar today. One of the things, again, that's been laid out is that HBCUs are this holistic and collectivist environment and support one another. So in surrounding our athletes with love, can you talk to me about what you've done as a professor to support those student athletes in their engagement and mental health, financial, at-home transitions through all of this? What is one of those best practices you could share with us?
I'll speak to athletes and to sport management majors together. We have a lot of athletes in our sport management classes, a number of them graduate level and undergraduate level. Like other universities, we also had a number of our students stay on campus. TSU was very, very different from other HBCUs as we have a huge demographic of international students. And so I'll share the story of one. We have one of our sport management students that's from the Bahamas, obviously had some major issues with returning home and so was on campus. One of the things that I did was reaching out to have telephone calls weekly with this kid, checking in, was huge. A lot of our international students have that disconnect, just cultural, we can go on and on and on. And so having that practice of maybe, usually, especially with me, I'm more of an email person, and changing that platform and being more of picking up the phone and actually calling and having those conversations that begin not with assignments, but how are you doing? Let's talk a little bit about what's going on. Have you touched base at home? Is there anything that I can help you with? Do you have any questions about practices and policies that are going on campus? There was a huge disconnect with a lot of our students with finding out, will graduation take place? What are we doing for graduation? Can we enroll in classes? And, you know, changing again that platform from email to actually picking up the phone and calling some of these kids was huge benefit just for connecting with them, not only with our athletes, but with our students as well.
Thank you. Thank you. This is such a robust conversation that we've had today. We've had so many subtopics, as Dr. Jackson said, so many subtopics that we could delve into and have our own independent show. But we're going to come to a close. And so with that, if you guys can provide for me in about a minute's time, 1 to 2 takeaways that you want those that are watching this particular episode to get from this conversation, whether it be HBCUs in general, athletes, mental health, COVID-19, if you could give us that final summation for us today.
I'll start. I would just say communication. Communication is the key to getting through this. I think this is all being made up as we go along. Coaches, instructors, administrators, we all have to come, you know, we all just basically have to put what we have on the table and see if it works for your institution, your department. But then also the other takeaway is don't forget to buy your copy of Sports and African American Life, edited by Dr. Drew Brown. There you go. It has myself and Dr. Carter Francique, as well as Dr. Cooper. Hot on sale at Amazon right now. See how smooth that was?
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Thank you.
I'll go next because on our screen, I believe I was the next one. So, and then I'll pass it to Marcus. I would just say 2 things: just be supportive and be resilient. And what I mean by being supportive, everything that all of us have been saying, be sensitive to the unique situations, mental health issues that our students, our staff, our faculty, and our community members around and beyond campus are going through. So be supportive, and then also be supportive financially to our institutions. I think that I'm optimistic that we as a people will do better at prioritizing donating back to our schools, whether you're an alumni of the school or not. I think that support moving forward is going to be important. And then the resiliency, as Dr. Flowers mentioned, you know, this is an opportunity for us to reevaluate what practices do we want to continue to do and amplify, and what practices do we just need to evolve from, not only in a post-pandemic era, but just in the 21st century. What are ways in which we can evolve and be resilient in our thinking about not only business practices, but educational pedagogy, programming, et cetera.
Thank you. Dr. Cavill.
Yes, again, thank you for this opportunity. I'm gonna take Dr. Cooper's framework, and we've had a chance to model it over at Texas Southern University, and that's what he's termed the collective uplift. He developed it obviously while he was at University of Connecticut. I'm sure he's moving it forward. If not, we're certainly taking advantage of it here at Texas Southern University. And it's about empowering, educating, and supporting and inspiring students across different socioeconomic groups, particularly here at Texas Southern University. But to span this conversation is just talking about how do you do that beyond that to the collective framework of HBCUs, and something that Coach Simmons talked about, the ability to expand that out to a larger group as they come in and ask the questions in this environment. What have you all been successful with in regards to doing these things in a limited resource capacity oftentimes? But the 3 tenets which I'll put out there of how we can really move things forward is understanding that holistic development focus. And so whether you're a coach, you're a faculty member, whether you are alumnus, talking about providing financial resources to these institutions. Obviously, if you're a practitioner in terms of what you're doing, is understanding that holistic development of developing the whole person. In this case, we're talking about the whole college athlete that happens to be at an HBCU. So continuing to do what we've done in the past, but doing it even in a much better and knowledgeable way. Secondly, engage in that mentorship process. These are young people that do not know their way. All of us talk about our experiences and how we develop, and as we can see here, have been in successful capacities. But all of us would say that we have some type of mentorship that has allowed us to get here. So we have to reach back, as they say in a lot of ways, to provide that mentorship in whatever capacity we are comfortable with doing. And thirdly, in a lot of ways, I'll talk about the cultural empowerment component of what that really means in terms of providing a culture, the HBC culture aesthetic that I talk about in the sporting HBCU diaspora. It is in a lot of ways doing that. And quickly, 4, 5, and 6 would be enhancing the campus experience in whatever ways you can, community outreach, and finally, understanding HBCUs, that reaffirmation that we are powerful, either as individual institutions and even more so collectively as Black institutions, and how that supports what we're doing in our communities and moving forward.
Thank you. Coach Williams, final takeaway.
I would say never forget the uniqueness of a HBCU. We are not the model of a PWI, and if we continue to focus on the issues and the things that our student population needs in order to be successful, I think that we will continue to be successful. I think sometimes when you're trying to fit into a space that you don't necessarily fit into, it makes it difficult. And just to continue to support our student athletes. We serve a great purpose to our students and our student athletes at HBCUs. They can reach to the highest level from any institution, and that's what we're trying to show, is that they can do that from anywhere. So I say continue to support and continue to show the uniqueness of HBCU across the country.
Thank you. Dr. Amos.
Yes, I'll take away. Understand that we have to support the holistic approach in reference to working with the athletes. Also understand that we do not have the blueprint. So we have to rely on our support team at our institutions and incorporate them with the holistic approach and holistic care focus for the student athletes, because this is going to be a trial and error process. We're going to have to continue to be innovative in how we provide support, because we do not know at this point on when we're going to go back to a sense of normalcy. So just focus on holistic care, and please implement support from the individuals that are at your institutions that are working with the athletes from a life skill standpoint.
Okay. Dr. Flowers. Final takeaways.
I think right now the focus, with so much going on in the world, COVID has unfortunately raised the eyebrow of racism and discrimination. And so with that, I say there's an invitation for everybody to come home. That homecoming invitation does not place borders or walls up for people that think that HBCUs doesn't offer them a space, doesn't offer them comfort. HBCUs are inclusive. They're not just for African Americans. We want people from all cultures, all genders, all races, all backgrounds to seek out an HBCU, learn more, go on the campuses, talk to professors, talk to students, really learn and see how this different system actually works. Right now is the time. These campuses provide a holistic view of what education is. We have family-based atmospheres that provide a flexibility for a lot of people. I think what's most important is that right now our voices are not being heard. A lot of people don't really understand or care what's happening on those HBCU campuses. So more now than ever, Dr. Keila Francique, again, thank you for holding this, giving us a space to kind of share our stories and let people inside. So our voices, the HBCU people, the people who are on the ground and who are working, are being able to tell our own stories.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Coach Simmons.
Well, thank you, Dr. Flowers, for that recruiting pitch. We need that, trying to get these guys back to HBCUs. But I'll kind of take a page from Dr. Amos as well as Dr. Cooper's book, and just say, be patient. Everyone just be patient and understand that there's some tough decisions that have to be made. And most of us on this call are in a position of leadership. And we understand the scrutiny that comes along with having to make some very tough decisions. We don't know the outcome. You know, we make decisions hoping that it's the best decision, hoping that it's going to turn out for the best. But sometimes it doesn't, you know, again, and we don't know that until we make that decision. So, you know, be supportive of our decision makers, of our presidents, of our athletics directors, of the people who have to decide how we move forward in this pandemic, because this is uncharted territory, like I said before. So there's no blueprint as to how we proceed. And so whatever that decision is, you know, obviously there are a lot of factors that are involved and there are a lot of moving parts, but we have to make some decisions. And as we talked about, sports is that one thing that kind of gives us that sense of normalcy. And so that's one of the quickest ways that we can get people's mind off of the pandemic, is to maybe resume some type of sports activity. So whatever that looks like, let's all be patient with it. Let's all try to be understanding to it. And let's all just try to support the people that make that decision so that they can make those tough decisions to allow us to resemble some sense of normalcy during this tough time.
Thank you all. Dr. Kiki Baker-Barnes had to exit real quick. She's in a slew of a lot of meetings to deal with things that are going on. But she also wanted to just say thank you for this opportunity to also continue to support HBCUs by making a gift, again, to support the student scholarships and facilities and technological enhancements to continue to help our institutions grow. And so we definitely want everyone to continue to do that. Let's see here. Dr. Cooper, did I get your final words? I wanted to make sure that I did not miss anybody in this closing segment.
Yes, I think you got me, so I don't know if any of the other panelists have been omitted.
I think we've heard from everybody. Again, this has just been an amazing conversation. I think there's so many layers to it, so many things that we can get to. We're gonna have this recorded such that other people can come back and chime in. I think we have opportunities to have smaller dialogues and maybe some other ones that will come back during the summer and sort of revisit some aspects of this conversation. But I wanna thank each and every one of you for joining us today. I encourage you all to reach out to us here at San Jose State University and the Institute. With that said, this is our team here. I've got Beth is in the background. Beth Doyle is my assistant working with us. I have a couple of students that also work with us. And let me do one more thing here, because just as we are recruiting and looking for sponsorship for our HBCUs, our institute as well. Again, it has an opportunity. Look at our respective platforms to hear continued conversation. Join our Facebook page, but feel free to give to support the institute so we can continue to engage individuals, organizations, and sport personnel in conversations like this. And we also ask you again to visit our website or just come to campus. Call us up. More than happy to take you on a tour. Share some of the great works at our university and our collections at our university library with us. So thank you, each and every one of you, for being a part of this program. And I think we have, let me see if we have any final comments coming from our audience. They are joining us. I want to make sure I don't cut anybody off. Okay. No, I think we got everybody. So thank you all for joining us on this Thankful Thursday, spending some time, sharing some knowledge, and sharing with our audience the importance of HBCUs, the value of HBCUs, the value of HBCU athletics, and these wonderful scholars, professors, coaches, experts in the field today. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.